Welcome to the If I Had More Time podcast at Mariners Church. This podcast series invites you into a casual conversation with our senior pastor, Eric Geiger, and our teaching team to hear a few helpful insights and truths they wish they had time to include in the weekend message. Be sure that you have listened to this weekend's message prior to listening to the podcast so you get the most out of our current series. We hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much for listening to the If I Had More Time podcast, guys. We're so glad you're joining us for week 6, the last week of our series in Song of Solomon. I am obligated to say this is going to be my favorite episode because my husband is here, Roddy Garcia. Finally.
Has he ever been on the podcast?
He has never been on the podcast.
This is so sweet.
It's really sweet. We talk about him a lot.
We do.
The listeners are intimately aware of our relationship.
So we all need to hear his voice. So Roddy, talk to us.
It's good to be here. Welcome to the If I Had More Time podcast.
Yeah, awesome.
That's him. So glad that you're here. He is also on our team here. He's one of our pastors as well. We're just really excited to get to talk with Kaye and Eric as well on this last week. Yep. I cannot believe that we're in the last week of Song of Solomon. So long ago, You started sharing with our team about this series, and you promised us it would be impactful and amazing, and you were so right, Eric. I am so grateful for this. I've had the richest conversations with my life group, with Roddy. People on our teams. We're really, really grateful.
Yeah. I love being able to walk through a book in the Bible with our church, and I'm thankful to be able to do it. Yeah.
There is a lingering question that I have that we've touched on before, and it's about Solomon.
Right.
It's about him being the author of all of this. You know, it's like this. You painted a beautiful picture with this last message, and the whole book has been kind of this flawless story of a relationship, right. But it's written by King Solomon. Which share a little bit about that, about his history, his background, what people know him for.
It is the biggest struggle that people have with the book, because and you know this, but sometimes people don't make the connection when they are reading Song of Solomon. Yeah. So Solomon is the third king in Israel. There's Saul, there's David, and then there's Solomon. Solomon's David's son. He's also the wisest man, or called the wisest man in the world. And then he ends his life and he starts marrying a bunch of other women, basically forming alliances with these neighboring people groups, neighboring countries, and starts worshiping the gods of those peoples. So it's not only adultery, it's idolatry. He then has concubines. So the scripture says he has a bunch of wives and a bunch of concubines. So not the guy who you think is going to write Song of Solomon.
Yeah. Right.
And have this amazing, just very insightful instruction-based book on love. And I mean, we just read chapter 8, verse 6 and 7, which is this really strong declaration of love with each other. So because scholars see Song of Solomon, and then they also see Solomon's life, they then wrestle with, okay, what happened here? And you have different viewpoints. You know, some say Solomon is writing about him and his wife before he messed up his life. That's one viewpoint. Okay. Others say, no, he's writing at the end of his life, looking back, and he's filled with ultimate wisdom, and he repented later in life, and he's looking back and he's writing what it should have been. Then you have other scholars that say, which really then is to point to, that Solomon's writing not about him and his bride, but just the ideal of love, which I tend to land there, but it doesn't really matter because the lessons are still the same. And that is, but even if you go that viewpoint, you got to wrestle, when did he write it? So did he write it early in his life, before he made an absolute mess of his life? Yeah. Did he write it after? So we know some things. He's not the only one that we have this problem with. So David wrote a bunch of Psalms, and he wrote some Psalms before he completely messed up his life and murdered Uriah and had an affair with Bathsheba. But then he also wrote Psalms after, you know. Solomon, he wrote this, whether it's about him and his wife or about ideal love in general. If he's writing about the end, if he's writing this book at the end of his life, he's looking back and he's writing from, this is what it should have been. Yeah. If he wrote it early, he failed to live up to what he wrote.
Well,
But either way, his life is not in alignment with what he wrote. So
It's still God's word.
so if you approach it, so I feel like probably for some listeners right now that, I mean, you could be tempted. Well, I mean, if the guy who wrote this didn't live this way, then how on earth am I going to have this kind of love relationship?
Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
So you have to remember that ultimately all the scripture is inspired by God.
Yeah.
This is we're really reading God's word of God's vision for what a relationship between a husband and a wife looks like. This is God's word. He used Solomon. Solomon was wise. He wrote wise words, but he's not really the ultimate author.
Yeah. That's a game changer for me, just knowing that God chose that man to write it.
Yeah.
But these are, every word is inspired by God.
Yes.
They're his words.
Yes, and profitable for
So,
teaching,
well, yeah.
It's right.
correcting for every good work.
It does show that we tend to get really disappointed when, more so than other parts in the Bible and in our lives, when a love story turns out not to be what we thought.
Yep.
It's disappointing. Because think about this. We know that Moses, who God used to bring the 10 Commandments to the people, that he didn't live by the commandments.
Yeah.
We haven't either. But we don't think, oh man, that makes the 10 Commandments less valuable.
Yeah, irrelevant. Yeah.
The fact that Moses didn't live by the commandments and we don't either, and which is why we need Jesus, it doesn't cause us to be like, oh man, oh no, then are the 10 Commandments good? We know they're good. But for some reason,
You're right.
our hearts are more grieved that Solomon messed up. It just shows that we really do want a great example of a marriage.
Yeah, and of a love story.
But we do. We want a love story. That's right. And we're disappointed. It's a bummer.
I mean, we do it. We do it in everyday life with celebrities who we are like thinking, enjoying watching their relationship, then they bust up. And we're just also disappointed.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's very true. You were sharing when we were walking over here. It's like there's a reason why we love rom-coms. Like they work out in the end. They always work out in the end.
There is a reason you turn on
We
Hallmark.
desire that.
And Disney princesses.
That's another
stories,
example.
like,
Yeah.
it really shows, and this can take us to another example of marriage being about more than marriage, but marriage being about the gospel and about our relationship with God.
Talk more about that. That's so good. I was so excited when you shared that. I want to hear more.
And I think it connects to our disappointment in finding out that Solomon didn't live by his own words.
Yeah.
Because we were made for, like I said, we long for a love story.
Yeah.
We are looking for a love story. And where's that come from? Well, that comes from, we really were created for the ultimate love story.
Yeah.
Which isn't a human love, but God's great love for us. Yeah. Gosh, it was years ago on a Christmas service at Mariners. I think 2019. I did an illustration
In the round?
it was in the round at Mariners Irvine, but we went to movie theater.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Wilkins on our team. He was not even on our staff yet. He was a contract guy who we then brought on our staff. He helped us put together the illustration of all these great stories that ultimately point to the ultimate story.
That's right.
And it was because C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien, they had a conversation, and
That's right.
it's when Lewis wasn't yet a Christian, and Tolkien told Lewis, really, the Christianity is the true narrative. It's the true fable. It's the story that's actually true. And so, Beauty and the Beast, the longing to be loved, no matter how you look, really shows us that Christ pursues us when we're not beautiful. Snow White, who's brought to life because she's pursued, is a picture of us being brought to life because Christ pursues us. That all these great stories, all these great love stories, there's something in them that points to the ultimate love story of Christ pursuing us. So we're bummed that Solomon wrote this and didn't live by it. We're bummed when a celebrity couple bust up. But there's something in us that longs for things to be right and longs for a real love story because that's what we were actually created for.
Yeah.
But it's not a human love. We were created for a relationship with Christ, which is why, to answer your question, marriage isn't just about marriage. We should enjoy marriage. Kaye and I enjoy marriage. You actually talked about this, that you hate this about you love the Bible, but you don't there's some verses in the Bible we don't love.
I don't know what he's about to say. Go ahead.
You don't love that we're not going to be married in heaven.
Oh, yeah. Let's not talk about that.
I know, that's kind of sad.
I want to be married to Eric in heaven.
What a bummer, Eric. Why you got to bring that up?
Because it answers your question. Because we were actually created that marriage is actually about a better marriage. Yeah. That our earthly marriage, is awesome as it is, baby, but you were created for more than me.
Yeah.
You were created for a relationship with Jesus that is the ultimate relationship, and that's the everlasting relationship. Hopefully the way I treat you is a picture of how Christ treats you, and how I pursue you is a picture of how Christ pursues you. But it's just a picture. The ultimate marriage is the everlasting marriage with,
Yeah, that actually reminds me a little bit of what Tim Keller talked about. So I think I was with Kaye. I was like, man, like I spent all this time looking for Liz, and then I found her, and then the majority of my eternity is not going to be married to her. So like, how does that make sense? And Keller talks about at the altar the symbolism of being man and wife, and the officiant representing God, and how on earth that marks the beginning. But as we enter heaven, that marks the eternal, this idea of I've lived my life with this woman, and I've done everything I can to make her more like you.
Yeah.
And we go in having had a life being more conformed to the image of Jesus because of the way we treated each other, ourselves, relationship with God. Yeah. So that helped me embrace the idea that it's an image.
It puts a high calling on the role to be a husband or a wife.
It doesn't lessen marriage, it actually elevates marriage, because it's not like, oh, this marriage, if this isn't forever, then it's less. No, the marriage is a metaphor of how Christ loves us. So marriage is even more important.
I think about it all the time, living in a house with 2 teenage girls, who, God has made them to want to be married, to want someone to love them, But I think about
to love the princess stories as kids.
They love the princess
because of wanting to be pursued, right?
It's true.
And so, but I think about it all the time, because I really do believe marriage is a reflection of the gospel. That I think about all the time, like things that they can see in us that can skew their view of the gospel or point them to Jesus. So it's like pursuing each other. Like Eric, I think both ways, but Eric pursuing me, that's a picture of Jesus pursuing them. Seeing us forgive each other. So pictures of Jesus forgiving them. There's so many. There's just so many. And sometimes we really mess up. And then there's that. There's us saying to them, okay, we really messed up here. Please forgive me. So it's the repentance and the reconciliation that again points to the gospel. So we have so many opportunities with people in our life to point them to the gospel through our marriage. Yeah. Even when we mess up.
Yes.
Even when we mess up.
Most often through that.
Yeah.
That really is a beautiful opportunity. I've been so grateful for how you guys have shared so much of your marriage with our church throughout this series. And I believe that you guys do have such an honorable example of a marriage for Roddy and I personally, but also just in how you share the stories and your sermons and things like that. And in this one, you talked about those 3, the time, tell, time, touch.
Yep.
Did I do that in that order?
Tell, touch, time.
Tell, touch, time. And I really appreciated where you talked about how it isn't quite so like robotic, whereas you do one, then the next, then the next. It's much more,
which is helpful for people like me. So thank you for that.
Because you'd be likely to schedule it.
Oh yeah.
It would be in our Google Calendar.
7 to 7:10 is telling time.
That's right.
7. Yeah.
this interwoven thing.
Interwoven, man. Mix all that stuff together.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess if you had to, you could start there.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Okay, so this is good. Perfect segue, because I do think that you guys have shared a little bit before about you have some helpful guidelines or parameters that you guys have put specifically around your time that I think would be super helpful for you to get to share. Or if you have anything else that's been helpful for you guys, kind of guidelines that you've given yourself for those three.
I'm curious on the telling, and I want to answer the time question. I said something that I hope's not controversial in the sermon.
I didn't hear it. I did.
You heard the sermon, Rosie.
She was there.
So when I said that that some scholars will say, the woman talks more in the song, but the man compliments the woman more than the woman compliments the man. That some have suggested that the wife needs more compliments than the husband needs.
I didn't think twice about that. I thought that is true.
Is that true?
I think it's true. I mean, I don't think it's probably not true 100% of the time.
Right.
I'm sure there's some guys out there who need a lot of compliments and a lot of encouraging words and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I would say it's true
a lot of the time.
Would you, Liz?
Yeah, I would. And I think I said this in a previous episode where I do also think that women have it harder, especially on their image whenever it comes to the world.
Yes, no, that's why you said it, and I thought that was wise.
And it's not fair to say that men don't, because I know you guys feel pressure, but I would say women more so than men do feel a certain pressure to look, dress, be a certain way.
Yes, that's true.
And so the husband's job is in part, I think, to
be the
reverse
chief
some of
complimenter.
that,
yes.
And to overpower whatever lies your wife might hear.
Yeah.
When she leaves your protection.
No, I think you do a good job at that.
The main point I was trying to make is that it's a mistake, and I could make the mistake that just because I don't need compliments, and I'm not saying that I don't need any compliments, but that I don't need, you need more compliments than I need.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So it would be a mistake for me to assume, well, I mean, I don't need that, so Kaye doesn't need that. No, in the song, the man compliments the woman more. I should be your chief complimenter. I should compliment you more. And
my gosh, if your wife is fishing for a compliment, that is a sign you need to beef up the compliments.
I have learned that. And I will say that when the wife fishes for a compliment, it's then not sufficient enough to then just give her the compliment when she's fishing for it.
That's right.
You then have to.
It just should be a sign of.
You have to make a mental note.
She shouldn't really have to go fishing.
That you have to ramp it up so that she doesn't have to fish. Yes. Okay. So that's my just counsel on the telling. Now,
okay, the time.
The time.
I think that we've had a priority on spending time together our whole marriage. Now, there have been times when we have not done a great job. I specifically remember when Eric was doing his doctorate. We just both kept going to school forever. We didn't have any kids.
And not just the doctorate, the dissertation phase.
It was specifically a dissertation phase.
There was about a 6 to 8 month window that was just hellish.
It was just a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was working, so I was just pouring myself into my job too. He was busy, so I busied myself doing things I loved, And so we naturally did not spend a ton of time together. I just now had this memory. We at the end of the dissertation, we went on a vacation together.
Yes.
Was it 2 weeks?
Yes.
I think we said we're going to do 2 weeks away when this is over.
We went to St. John.
Yeah, that's right. And we looked and looked and looked so forward to that time. The first few days...
We had no kids yet.
No kids. The first few days, I remember us fighting a lot.
And it was just so that we could have makeup sex.
No, that did happen, but...
Now you know.
I really think it was because we had not been talking much.
That's right.
You were getting reconnected.
That's right. We need to recommunicate.
There had been a season of time where we weren't telling or talking or touching as much as we should have been because we were so busy. So after those first few days, it was way better after that. But I think we had to realize, okay, we have been off track.
Yeah.
And so I guess we have a priority of having a date night every week. We actually spend a lot more time together than just one night a week. I mean,
even in busy times, we would do one night a week.
Even in busy times.
Now it's one night a week, and then we have time together on my day off where
we'll
go. Sometimes we'll have Sometimes we'll have 2 dates a week. when our kids get done with
That's
school,
right.
we are going to be having like 5
But
nights.
when our kids were little
Yeah.
and we were having to pay for a babysitter,
Oh,
you know, we
man.
had a family traded off
Yeah.
with, so we didn't have to pay for it. That was great. And then but we still made it a priority of one time a week. You know, still a priority.
That's genius. What did you just say? You would trade off with another family.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you guys
actually,
have
the
date night.
Molinas. It's when we lived in the same city as them, and we both had a bunch of little kids, and so I think our night wasn't it always Thursdays?
It was always Thursday, and when it was our turn, Jessica would come. Our turn for a date. Jessica would come to our house so that the kids didn't have to, you know.
She would feed them dinner.
Yep.
She'd fix dinner, but fix enough for our kids too. So she'd feed them dinner, give them baths, put them to bed, did everything for us to be able to go out.
And then the next week, Kaye would go do that at their house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we had a date night, you know, a really good date night, a long date night every other week.
And then the opposite weeks we would have a home date after
Amazing.
the kids went to bed.
Yeah,
Amazing.
go pick up Cuban
Yeah.
food and
Yeah.
watch a movie and
Yeah, just to save money.
Yeah.
But we have always really protected our time. I mean, which means I say no to a lot of other things. I have thought, because I really love people so much, you know, I have thought, gosh, you know, a lot of people have a lot more girls' nights than I do. But that's a choice I've made.
Mm.
It's a choice I've made. I mean, there's only so many things we have time for.
Mm-hmm.
And I love spending time with my friends.
Yeah.
But if I have to choose, you know, I know that the investment of spending time with Eric is gonna pay off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, such huge fold. I mean, when hard times come, if you don't already have the investment,
Yeah.
then you're not gonna suddenly start talking a lot then,
Right.
or touching a lot. Definitely not gonna touch a lot then.
Yeah.
And I mean, so none of those things are just gonna start during a hard time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And with my, I mean, I do a lot of preaching at church, you know, with my job. So there's a lot of nights where I have responsibilities. So, you know, you do that, count those times, and then times with Kaye and times with my daughters. I mean, there's rarely that I'm, you know, you say that, you know, I mean, I have friends, you have friends, but you know, I'm not doing a lot of wing nights with guys or, you know.
I think we're just not in that season right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Having
Exactly.
family
Yeah.
dinners and time alone is our priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ministry, time with each other, time with our kids.
Yeah.
That's this season for us.
Yeah.
And
So you guys have a weekly protection. Do you
Yep.
guys have any others like
yes,
throughout the year or
Yeah.
anything?
every year. And I know that people looked at it as it was crazy, but we've always gone on vacation together a week away for 27 years.
No kids.
And even when kids came, right away when kids came. So year
Eddie
one,
was 6 months old.
and Eden too was like a year old.
Did not even probably. Yeah, like 9 months old.
So I remember when we went away for a week when Eden was
I think she's about 9 months old.
about 9 months old. People were like, "You're leaving your daughter already?" Because we had friends I've had friends who have said, "We haven't been away for more than one night in 10 years." I mean, I've had friends who've said that. I'm like, man, I'm telling you, man, it's not like a verse in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't view that person as they love Jesus less. I'm just saying time away with your wife is it's so good.
I don't think I know a single person that we've encouraged to do it that's done it, that's come back and said, "She don't like it
Yeah.
at all."
Right.
I mean, I think every person, I can't think of one. I think every person I know that has tried it, just start little, start with just a couple nights away, has come back and said, "I want to do that more. That makes me want to do it more."
Yeah.
So
It totally rekindles your love for one another. It is interwoven with the telling and the touching. It really is, and it's time away with your spouse is also, I think, massively important for what marriage is going to be after your kids graduate high school.
yes, I was going to say the same thing.
We do not want to be, because we've heard people say this, that their kids graduate and they forgot how to be married with each other.
Yeah.
And we think it goes back to the marriage being a statement of the gospel. We think our kids seeing us be head over heels committed to one another, in love with each other, is one of the best things that we can. Reading the Bible is important with them, but actually showing them the gospel in our marriage is.
We can't wait for them to go to college. I'm just kidding.
Aw.
And when they were little, I think that's the hardest time. I think that's the hardest time because they're very needy. I mean, they're little kids. Eric and I both loved that stage.
It was so fun.
Lots of playing with our kids. But that does mean there's time. That's time that you don't have just the two of you.
Yeah.
But we had a commitment to them going to bed early.
Yes, I'd say like the going to bed early time.
That was the big deal. It was a big deal.
Oh my gosh.
We kept it up as long as possible.
They being, yeah.
Eden was in 7th grade when she's.
I don't know if we should say this publicly because they're going to listen to this and
I'm going to say it.
Man, you were making that girl go to bed so early.
Eden's so compliant. So when she was in 7th grade, she said she was still going to bed at 7:30. And so she says to me, what time did I go to bed? So she's 13. What time did I go to bed when I was 3? And I said, I think 6:30. And she said, so in 10 years, I've gained 1 hour. And I was like, I never really thought about it like that. So we had to come off that a little bit. But
for that long time,
Evie wasn't as compliant.
The kids would go to bed so early. I mean, we'd still have several hours together. That is done. We fall asleep now before our kids fall asleep.
So. For sure.
So
they're for sure putting us to bed now.
They're putting us to bed.
But that's the key when they're little, I think.
Going to bed early for the kids, yeah. And there's research that says that's when their minds grow, so we were doing it for them, baby.
That's right.
We weren't just doing it for ourselves. We were doing it for them.
Suffice it to say, you had to take measures to protect that time and to invest in your marriage.
It can go away if you don't fight for it.
Yeah, and I'm curious too. Like I'm hearing kind of season. So there's the college age for the kids, early in the marriage when they're little.
Yeah.
Like how would you guys say you assess the season you're in? And then I'm also thinking of like when we both of us had a good run of singlehood and enjoying that and wanting to love our married friends well in their marriage and not getting our feelings too hurt when life changed. So how do you guys assess and maybe what role did friendship play in that to support your marriage?
I think when we first got married,
That's a great question.
We had friends in college that we still wanted to be friends with. That was probably one of the hardest times.
Yes, I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Because all of a sudden our relationship with our friends, like we weren't going to be having a burger at 1 a.m. like we were just a couple of weeks before when we got married,
Yeah.
And they were great friends.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't their fault or our fault. It's just things had to change a bit in our relationship because now this marriage is most important.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And then I think married without kids is a stage. Mm-hmm. Married with little kids is a stage. But it's kind of like how when you have a kid, God is so gracious in how he prepares you. When the child comes out, the kid's not walking.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So you start, you hold and then crawl and then walk. You kind of, and the same thing with how a kid impacts your marriage. If the kid is going to sleep early, you still have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so you kind of work into the years that can stress the time out the most is when they're staying up later and you can't leave them alone yet. So
there's a lot of those years.
So those are the more challenging years.
Yeah.
Now they're staying up later, but we can leave them alone. Yeah. So we can go on a date and leave them alone. The years where they're staying up late and you can't leave them alone, that's when you have to be more disciplined with having a babysitter lined up. Yeah, you have to be more planned. Yeah. We don't have to be as planned right now because
that's very true.
We're back to we don't have to be as planned stage. Yeah.
I think for us friends, it seems like when we didn't have kids, we had all of our friends had kids. All of our friends had kids, I feel like. But then we kept their kids for them. Like we enjoyed their kids,
we were the last ones to have kids.
So that was fun. But then a lot of our friends had babies at the same time, which was also super fun, Yeah. I think Eric's right. I think you just kind of learn as the stage comes.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kaye and Roddy.
Yes,
so glad
you guys were awesome.
What an amazing series. So I can't believe it's over. We're wrapping the If I Had More Time podcast for Song of Solomon. So I'm so grateful for all the conversations that we got to have. Kaye was on here a few times. So thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening to the If I Had More Time podcast. Thanks for joining us today on the If I Had More Time podcast hosted by Mariners Church. We hope to see you next weekend at any of our congregations across Southern California or online. To view our service times at each congregation, be sure to check out our website at marinerschurch.org.